Welcome back. South Philly Sauce, an Audacy original brought to you by 94 WIP and Jack Daniels, Ashlyn, Sullivan, Al Morganti. Getting ready for a big weekend here in Philadelphia, a big hockey game Saturday night and a big football game on Sunday. And the Flyers, as of right now, are on a 4-game losing streak. And it is tough to stay positive right now. I won't lie to you, especially after that last game against the Dallas Stars. I think that is the most frustrating post-game show we've had in a while, because you were kind of left saying that was just simply a bad game. And John Tortorella was honest post-game that they have had very few of those clunkers. And he's right. Rarely in a post-game show are we left saying, you know what, they just played bad. And they just played bad against Dallas. You wanted to snap a losing streak. You did the opposite. You extended it. And it's especially a bummer because it was Sam Ersson's first game back, Al.
Yeah, it was. I got my Swedish hockey hat on because Sam's back. And it's to me, that was the most important part of the night, was that he came back and I thought played pretty well. And I was happy afterwards because, you know, when we do the post games, you know, we're doing everything, and then we get the reaction from the players and the coach. And you're always like, after you say something or Scott says something, you're thinking, oh, they don't say 180 degrees the other way. But I actually thought that Sam Ersson played pretty well. And for him to say afterwards, like, because he's pretty aware of what's going on, that he was kind of happy with his game. And, you know, you never point fingers that it was a bit of a mess in front of me, but it was like it wasn't a very tight game. And so the plus I took was Ersson's back. And that's really important because the backups have been so iffy, either one of them. And for him to come back and play that way, I think was really important. The play in front of him was, you know, you go through a season, you don't have a handful. I don't care how good you are. Even the best teams in the league will go through a week where they're terrible. So I think what was disappointing was that the goalie came back and you didn't have a strong game in front of him against a team that played really well, Dallas. And the Flyers were outplayed virtually every area of the ice. And that doesn't happen very often. But I do think, Ashlyn, it was interesting that the Tortorella's tone was far different from when you would think previously when they had a stinker of a game. He just kind of said it matter-of-factly, which was kind of, to me, good and bad. The good part of it is like, okay, the goalie played good, you don't want to jump all over him. But the bad part of it is you wonder if they're not at the point where they think this is the max I can get out of this team right now.
Yeah, it is at that point. And you kind of almost felt it coming in a weird way with this team, because it has been especially scoring where they just haven't been clicking. And you've seen Matvei Michkov slow down. You've seen TK be a little inconsistent the past month. It kind of felt like this clunker was coming for sure. But then you have a game this weekend, which is so easy to get excited for. You could easily see how they turn it around. But I think your only hope right now is that Sam Ersson, you hope he stays healthy and you hope he stays consistent. And that gives you a chance to fight back in this. And even with how poor the Flyers are playing, or how long it's been since you feel like they've had a convincing win, they're still only 4 points out of a playoff spot. I mean, that can change in a weekend.
Yeah, the NHL is like, it's hard to play yourself out of anything because of the point you get in a loss if you drag a games into overtime. So it served its purpose. It keeps the league kind of close together, and most fan bases with at least a hope of a playoffs into the second half of the season. We're into the second half of the season. But then there's the reality of what your eyes see. And it's like, you wonder now, you know, can they keep, I mean, because they played very well. When you look at it, that road trip, I mean, they really played decent in all the games with subpar goaltending. But you wonder how long you can keep doing that. Like, I watched the team and I watched that Cates line, Cates and Brink and Forster, and I'm like, yeah, they're playing like the first line, but that's not a first line. When you look around the NHL, that's really playing over. Yeah, like playing over your, you know, playing over what the expectations were. How long can this go on? I mean, any line can be hot for a little bit. They're very good players. Forster especially has been really good. But I mean, that shouldn't be the line that you're depending upon night after night after night. So we'll see what happens. He'll Konechny get going again. He's had some. You mentioned Michkov. I'm a little concerned there that when he a 20-year-old, just turned 20-year-old, losing your legs basically in the middle of a season. Yeah. So I'm just wondering about that. I mean, surprising to me to even have a conversation that, is he not mentally grueling, but physically, I'm like, I don't know, that should be. Maybe he just, I can't understand that your off season is different after you've seen what you have to do in the regular season in the NHL. But I'm presuming that next year there's no issues about hitting a flat spot like this.
Yeah, to me, it wasn't that surprising because I think we see it in every sport. They call it the quote unquote rookie wall. And you definitely see that right now with Michkov to the point where John Tortorella was pretty honest at Morning Skate the other day that the number one priority for the Flyers will be that they want Michkov here all summer in Philadelphia. They want him with the training staff, with the conditioning staff. He made a point to talk about nutrition a couple of times. So frankly, to me, it just sounds like Michkov still has to learn how to be the pro off the ice, which how many players have we heard, a coaching staff talk to about that? It just doesn't happen overnight.
No, and that goes into all sports. I mean, that's what some fans lose sight of, like, okay, your season is X amount of games long, but you're paid to be in shape all the time. And I know Sixers fans are hearing this. If there are any lines thinking, well, somebody ought to get in somebody else's ear about that. But it's like, that's what you have to do. That's when they say, well, you have to learn to be a pro. Why kids come in and watch what the veterans do in the weight room, why they ride a bike. If you watch the games and you see the board behind the interviews, it'll have, like, if you didn't play X amount of minutes, you have to go a certain amount of time on the bike afterwards. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the games and not just even the practices that you watch. It's all that stuff that goes beyond. I mean, what's that saying? Champions are made when nobody's watching. Yeah. That's when nobody's watching, but you have to feel like somebody's watching. Not that you can't go have a Big Mac every once in a while, right. but you can't live on, the Big Mac or whatever. You really got to be a pro the whole time and train that way. But coming from another country, coming over and learning about, it's not even the other country, it's just the number of games and the every other night aspect that you have to get used to and what it takes, how much sleep you have to get. All of that secondary stuff becomes primary in the middle of a season.
Right. And I think as a whole, with everything that Michkov has gone through this year, I think everyone has the confidence. Give him a summer, give him a full off season here in Philadelphia with the staff. And I think we're going to see a big difference next season. That's definitely the hope. And there's no reason to believe otherwise with the way we've been around him and how he's applied himself. So I don't predict this being an issue going forward, but something that's really easy to get excited for sure, is this Saturday's game against Anaheim. I know when the schedule came out, even our coworkers were buying tickets to this game because they wanted to see this in action. Gauthier coming back to Philadelphia for the first time. And it was funny, Brian Boucher in the media room the other day, he got me. I think he got a couple people. He's like, yeah. Have you heard they're not going to play him? Like he's banged up and like, they're not going to play him. I was like, what do you mean they're not playing him? He fooled a bunch of us, but he is playing, and it's going to be exciting because I think the Flyers need something like this right now to rally around.
Yeah, you got to need a good villain to come in. It's weird that the villain is not Sidney Crosby-esque in terms of impact in the game, but a kid that, the backstory everybody knows didn't want to come here, ended up getting traded for Drysdale. We'll talk about him, but it's like, okay, you don't want any part of us. It's this can be I don't care what sport it is. If somebody says, I don't want to be in Philadelphia, when you come into Philadelphia, you're going to hear about it. And I'm sure that, the crowd will be all over him, at least verbally. It was funny in Anaheim. I had a couple of friends that went to the game in Anaheim, and he said there were a lot of Flyers fans in Anaheim booing him every time he touched the puck. And this is in Anaheim. So I can't imagine what it'll be like here. It'll be loud. It'll be fun. I don't know the kid at all, but I know that he seems to want to embrace this, at least from stuff that he said. Now, it's one thing to talk about it before, and it's quite another to be able to handle it. One of the great parts of what you hope is, and I don't think there's any chance, but when the Flyers fans do it to Crosby, it's a mistake because he just uses it to crank up the engines, and he just feeds off of it. He absolutely feeds off it. Tom Brady did that for years. Gretzky loved it when that happened. So we'll see what happens here. There's no doubt it can be a tough place, and this should bring the Flyers fans all together in this. There's a huge downside to this. It's the side nobody wants to talk about. I mean, if this kid lights it up, hasn't so far, but who knows? That could be ugly if that happens here. So the Flyers will be, and I'm sure they'll be well aware of this, and it'll be a very interesting game, very interesting pregame skate, or just warm up. All of that's going to be really cool.
Electric that day.
I wish they allowed more signs in the building anymore, but I don't know what that sign man will bring, but I'm sure it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. And you talk about the negative that has to be addressed. We think that Sam Ersson will be in nets on Saturday. So that's good news. They'll play strong defensively in front of him because you don't want Cutter Gauthier to light it up in your own building. But everyone, I fear for their careers, at least for the shortcoming here, is going to compare Cutter Gauthier to Jamie Drysdale in this trade. And as of right now, Jamie Drysdale does not look anywhere near the player that Cutter Gauthier is. And Drysdale was supposed to be something you could build around with your defense. And he has looked a couple of games, looks tired, looks like he's not asserting himself in play. And it's definitely a question because his health has been in question all season long. We know he's healthy back on the ice, but this is not the Jamie Drysdale that you hoped you were getting in this trade.
Yeah, Cutter Gauthier, when you struggle in games as a forward, you drop down a line or whatever, and you're on the ice, 15 minutes, whatever. But a defenseman, he makes a mistake and it sticks out much larger. And Drysdale's, he's a smallish defenseman, and the Flyers have issues with that. The whole league. I mean, you can play as a smaller defenseman, but you have to be really, your positioning has to be very good. Your stick work has to be very good. He's been in the wrong place more than a couple of times. The last game, even against Dallas, he looked overmatched at times in front of the net. Now, in front of the net is chaos. But as you become a better defenseman, you learn positioning. You learn when you have to take a stick and hit that stick down so the offensive player can't get to the puck, or lift the stick up, or just get in the way or position so that you take your man out of the front. And you also have to learn when to kind of back off so you have the energy to win those scrums in front of the net. And he hasn't done a lot of that. He's looked overwhelmed at times in front, and sometimes overplaying things. What you don't want to do is take out his natural instincts. I mean, with the puck, bringing it up, we hoped on the power play. That hasn't happened yet, but that's a tough position to compare when you're saying a forward coming in and a defenseman coming in. So they have to have great patience. But to be totally honest, I thought there'd be more flashpoints of a really good play in his game, and we haven't seen those flashpoints. I thought to be at least it was because when he first came, there were flashes really early. With the skating and moving across the blue line and stuff and plays like that. Haven't seen as much of that in this season. And I think that they're going to, it's a work in progress, but I'm hoping that it just clicks with this kid, because you can just tell when you watch, man, that he could be a dynamic player. But so far there's been too many misreads, miscalculations on his part. I think he looks like a player that sometimes, I could go A or I could go B. And while you're thinking of that, the opposing player goes to C. So just make a play. And if you have to live with a mistake, you live with a mistake.
Yeah, you can tell as of right now, it's not instinctual for him, that he's overthinking, that he's moving, I think, a second slower than the play is progressing. And you got to think, I'm sure the coaching staff is telling him, just get out there and play. And we're not seeing that as of late with Jamie Drysdale. And he's a guy that the Flyers need to get going, that they need to be able to count on more consistently, because as of right now, defensively, especially against Dallas, it was not strong enough in front of your goaltender. And it leads us to our last point, which is this next 2 weeks is really, I think, the turning point of the season. I talked to Garnet Hathaway about this at morning skate, and they're well aware. I mean, if the Four Nations, that break is everything, and you have to feel good about yourself going into that break. The Flyers, as of right now, on a 4-game losing streak. And even if you win a couple here or there, it simply just has to look different. It has to look like the Flyers of last season, where you saw progress every single game as you went on. And it's been the opposite. It's been so up and down that you really can't hang your hat on anything right now.
Yeah, this is going to be just going into the next week when, you're at home, you get this big game with Anaheim, you got a pretty full week coming up, packed schedule going into the break. This is where you have to say we're going to stay with the pack. They've been fortunate to stay with the pack with what I keep mentioning, like 9 regulation wins, which is crazy when you look at it, to be still in that pack with a Ranger team that's won twice as many games in the 60 minute of regulation. You have to be able to stay close enough right now, because it's not even, you're not even looking at the real end of the season. You're looking at the trade deadline stuff, like what are they going to do? And this is where when Danny Briere says, the players will tell us what to do. The next few weeks are going to decide whether the players tell you we're going to keep a lot of this roster intact, or, okay, we've seen this. This player is going to be a part of our future. This player might not. We can move this piece to get a better draft pick or another young player. These next few weeks are going to determine which path the management takes in terms of keeping this together. I mean, Ristolainen. Well, I think he should be part of the future the way he's played right now. But you look at teams that need defensemen, and man, they could get a ton for him probably if he keeps playing this way. And if they look at this team and say, well, we're not progressing like we thought we would. Look, this whole thing is completely derailed because of their goaltender situation with Carter Hart. So they have to look at that too. Like, is Sam going to be the guy? Can Sam be a number one guy? There's these next few weeks determine an awful lot, not just for 2024-25, but beyond that, on what they're going to do. And I suspect when we go to games, there'll be like a ton of scouts from other teams coming and taking a look at guys. And it'll be really, it's going to be really interesting what this team tells the front office to do in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I feel like it's no in between, right? It's one direction, and it's going to be drastic either way, but definitely going to be something that's going to be interesting to watch.
And it'll be fun. It'll all start with Anaheim, and I don't know that I'm going in the crowd this. I think Scott goes down there. That'll be a wild crowd to go in, and you'll be wearing your high heels again, I guess, right?
I will. I'll wear comfier shoes. I had to put my Uggs on because, everyone needs a break from time to time,
Yeah, and you're 3 inches smaller. It's like
I exposed myself. Everyone always says when they meet me in person, like, wow, I thought you would be so much taller. And I say, why? I
felt like I was working with Ashlyn's little sister. Oh.
Dang it. I'm really 5'8", I swear. And that's South Philly Sauce, an Audacy original, brought to you by 94 WIP and Jack Daniels. We will recap these weekend games early next week. We'll see you then.